We're going to break away from that discussion for a short while so we can look in detail at an AR project. Unable to get to Augusta National in person last year because of COVID regs, Sky Sports used augmented reality graphics to great effect to bring viewers closer to both the action and to the players. To tell us how and why they did it, let's go over to Sky Sports Director of Golf Jason Wesley and his team to find out more.
Thank you, Will. I'm Jason Wesley. I'm Director of Golf at Sky Sports, and we're going to talk and show you a bit about how we brought the Masters to life last November in our Sky studios in London. The big challenge was, of course, we couldn't get out to Augusta, so we had to somehow elevate the tournament, the great major that the Masters is, by using our innovation and technology in Sky Studios. And we used that by integrating Skyscope into our studio, bringing players and course holes into life, into the studio, showing the viewers exactly what it was like to see Dustin Johnson and to see the holes at Augusta National before them in the studio. So I'm going to introduce you to three of the main parties involved in bringing that to life in a minute. But first, let's have a look at Dustin Johnson in the studio to see what the viewers actually saw.
Let's take him from Augusta, interrupt the party, bring him in here now using our Skyscope technology and take a look at him with the driver. What do you love about this move? It's a different looking move, but it's a very efficient one.
Yeah, I love the fact that it's his move, Nick. You know, the way he sets up, the way he has the little trigger, the slight little move just as he takes the club back. But he sets it early into that position, just turns the shoulders, and he's still in the set position at the top of the backswing. I mean, it's incredibly powerful. It is described by coaches, of course, as shut, but to him, you know, it's not. It's in the perfect position. The club face is pointing out up at the top. All he does is wind beautifully into that impact position.
It makes sense with it as well, the height that he has, but also how high the arm is. And we know that the bigger the circle, the wider the circle, the faster the outside's going to be moving. Yeah. It sort of makes sense when you see that coil he's got there. Look how much shoulder turn he's got there. Why he shifts it so far, Andrew.
Yeah, massively. You know, when you relate that to John Ram, who doesn't actually get through 90 degrees, it really is incredible. It's a massive, big, powerful wind-up using all the levers. Big man, big hands, powerful arms, and a tremendous amount of coil in there. So he gets up to that position, and he's set at the top.
You know what? That leg action, having played with you, reminds me of you, actually, because you have a certain amount of coil and rotation in those legs, almost straighten out that right leg. All the same leg action, but double the power, Andrew. Down to strike, how important is his turn-through strike?
It's an incredible physical specimen, there's no doubt about it. Yes, huge. The interesting thing is he doesn't sort of release the club as we would understand that, as we would have done it. He maintains that position with the left hand at the impact zone. The club face is perfectly square. He holds that down the line for as long as he possibly can. There's no flick of the wrist at that point. He then subsequently releases it once the ball is projected on a massive path down the fairway.
Is that one of the reasons he's so good at flighting the golf ball and why he should be such a great prospect for Opens to come as well?
I think that's a very good point, isn't it? You know, he can play the ball down low, just moves it slightly further back and he stands, opens, he stands up, or actually he can move it off the front foot and launch it straight up into the sky. He's incredibly talented, and that's how he's managed another victory here.
Well, hopefully there's quite a few youngsters watching here with eyes on the prize of one day being the next Dustin Johnson.
So there we have it. Dustin Johnson brought to life brilliantly in the Sky Studios for the Masters in November 2020. And Nick Dougherty and Andrew Coulthard did a fantastic job presenting that. But there were also so many other people involved in that process. Our partners at MRMC and Dimension Studios at Nikon. And we originally filmed all these assets, these players, in a giant dome at Royal Port Rush at the Open Championship in 2019, and brought these assets into the Sky Studios. Some of the people are here with me on this chat to discuss how exactly we did that. Mike Allen, the director, Dominic, Hudson in charge of the technical side, and of course Nick Dougherty as well. So I'll come to you first, Dom. And how did we bring that amazing image into the Sky Studios? Can you explain briefly?
Yes, thanks, Jay. So for the studio, we used a combination of Unreal and Viz. We streamed the Unreal output to the Viz engine, utilizing a bespoke Unreal plugin, and then we would have a general AR setup that people may be aware of, such as delayed video. We'd have the camera up to several zoom and pans to adjust the timing to keep it all in line. And once we're in an acceptable tolerance level, we would then refine this by using Viz Tracking Hub and delaying the streamed tracking data until it matches the picture, the golfer matches the pictures. But due to restrictions in the studio, we pretty much set everything up beforehand. We then box shifted the tracking rig and the Steadicam back into the studio floor, and that really only meant that we had to add minimal setup within the studio, such as finding the tracking limits within that studio due to lighting, tweaking the delays, and just knowing where the space where we could track around in that area without fundamentally jumping or skipping. What made it a lot easier was in the golf studio, we had the raised Zen green, and we would use that as our 0 point known where the golfer was going to be placed, which also made it easier for Nick to walk around because it was in a predominantly placed where they would be hitting into the shot center, or the I forgot what it's called now, sorry, but the shot area that we had. But once we basically positioned the model, we would manipulate the model in Unreal using a bit of software called VisArc. This would allow us to add color to match the lighting, and add shadows to match the presenter shadow path, along with triggering the golfer's movements. I think this was the easy bit. I think the hard bit is directing around this, and probably for Nick presenting to nothing or walking around a non-existent model is probably quite awkward, I'd imagine.
Brilliant, thanks, Dom. Well, you make it sound very, very simple. It was incredibly difficult, and of course, you mentioned all the COVID restrictions that we had to adhere to as well. That made our job and your job particularly hard. So you did it brilliantly. Also, Nick, you did it brilliantly as well. From your point of view, from an ex-golfer and our anchor of the Masters, and from a presenter, what were you trying to get across to the viewers, and what areas of success do you think we achieved?
Well, ironically, Jason, listening to Dom describe the technical parts of pulling all that together, that sounded like a foreign language to me. And it's ironic because the whole purpose of this technology is to make it as simple as possible for the viewer at home. So the idea that you can move in a 360-degree plane around the golfer and see every single part of his golf swing in one position at a time as well. So we could take Dustin Johnson, who was the world #1 when he won the Masters, his second major in his career, the premier player in the world of golf. Everyone wants to know how he does it, and he has a unique swing in golf as well. So to pick it to pieces is a real pleasure at the best of times. Typical camera angles would be face onto the golfer, so looking at his chest, or down the line he's hitting. With our technology, we can move completely around him, pausing him in certain positions, and it makes it a lot easier. What is difficult in a verbal sense to explain to someone at home exactly what makes his golf swing tick, to be able to move around him and visually show this happen makes it so much more simple for them to understand, and also to apply parts to their own game. So the technology really allowed us to pick apart the premier player's golf swing in the game, and something that's never before been seen on TV. The technical part of it was awesome. For me, also, you have to say it's wickedly cool that you can take the guy who's just won the Masters from Augusta National, pull him through that screen in the shot centre, and have him there in that virtual sense. It was a real pleasure to be a part of. And my job, I must say, was much easier than Dom's or Mike's.
Well, everyone's job is different challenges, and one of those different challenges was provided by Mike, who's the director in charge of it. And your job, Mike, was really to communicate it, to make it work, and to what we were trying to do, of course, is make up for the fact that we weren't at Augusta National like we would be normally, and do something extra for the viewers, bring it to life in an extra special way. And the whole team did that so well. But behind the scenes, so many elements, so many people are involved, and your job is to bring all that together. How were you able to do that, and what were your challenges particularly?
Well, I think, do you know, the most important thing is you just never do it because you can. I mean, what Nick said is absolutely right. It's a really cool piece of technology. It's a really cutting edge piece of technology, but that doesn't mean anything if you just do it because you've learned how to do it and you found ways around 3D tracking or whatever. So from my point of view, the most important thing is to make it interesting, fun, informative, and it's just there. And that really all starts from Nick. It starts from Nick and the cameraman. We had a fantastic cameraman called Gary Leslie, who had to learn how to work a Steadicam in a really tight, small environment with a model that he can only see through a little viewfinder that's attached to his rig. So my bit was, my bit's fairly easy once we know what we're doing. Obviously, it's massive effort to get there. So a lot of work has gone on beforehand, and you just can't let that get in the way of what you try and do in the end. And it all then stems from Nick. I follow him. I'm not a golfer at any level. And so Nick has got to be able to tell the story. And my job is to follow him, and for Gary, the cameraman, to follow me. So I think you have to put all the technology to one side and say, right, that's great, that's cool, but how can we make it fun and interesting and informative? And in many ways, that's the second big challenge, because once you've worked on the technology, and that does take a long time, the next bit is to make 2 minutes fun and interesting. And I think I just do that by making sure that Nick leads it. It's not for me to say, oh, we could do this, we could do that. It's for him to pick out the bones of it, and then for between me and Gary to make it come to life. And I think that's the real challenge. Just don't do it because you can. Do it because when you do it, you add value.
Fantastic. And I know how much work you put into the rehearsals, painstaking positioning of the 3D models, getting everybody in, everybody safe, and talking through this for literally hours before we actually came to record it. So Mike did a fantastic job. And of course, it's worth saying that these pieces were run into mainly live golf, but also some build-up areas of the program. But of course, golf is always going on at the Masters, so the viewer always thinks that when you are going away to features or commercial breaks or the Sky Scope, for instance, you're going away from live golf, even though in essence the broadcast, when you broadcast golf, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. But the viewer thinks you're going away from live golf, so even more important to keep these pieces short, concise, incredibly informative, entertaining, and everything that Nick Dougherty and Andrew Coulthard brought to that last Dustin Johnson piece. Well, one of the other things we did, as well as the Sky Scope, was the virtual holes. Augusta, 18 brilliant, iconic holes across this amazing golf course cut through the hills of northwest Georgia, and of course this is a beautiful piece of land and fantastic golf holes. And if we're not there, then we're trying to make this come to life even more. And one of the ways we did this was to use virtual cutout 3D models of the holes. And here's an example of that, the fifth hole at Augusta National.
Let's take a virtual look at the par 4 fifth hole. Last year it was the hardest hole on the golf course, averaging 4.34, 103 bogeys and 6 doubles as well. Sounds challenging, and this is why last year was the first time we've seen added distance to the hole. It is 40 yards longer and 4.95 on the card, so it is a beast of a par 4. The reason they added the length was to bring in the bunkers down the left-hand side, and they are proper bunkers as well. They become, well, a little bit out of play over the years because of the fact that the ball's going that bit further. Now they are back in play, and I can promise you they are deep. They are big enough to hide a couple of London buses in. So you have to try and avoid them off the tee. If you go in those bunkers, you're going to struggle to be able to get to the green in 2. But unfortunately, for Augusta National Golf Club, as always, Bryson seems to be ahead of that curve, and in fact this is what we predict he will be able to do from that tee. 40 yards added to it, still no dramas. 314 through the air to fly those bunkers, more than capable of doing it. And believe it or not, folks, this is what is within reason for Bryson DeChambeau, and if he hits it there, this beast of a par 4 is no more. It's an opportunity for a 3 for him with a flick into the green. However, we should caveat that with there's out of bounds down the right hand side, so if he leaks one to the right, there's the opportunity across that tree line to find some real bother for him. When you get to the green, it only just gets going, really, because this is the hardest green on the course to putt on as well. An immense amount of slopes, that false front trying to feed the ball off the green, the back bunker very much coming in play. Really difficult green to 2-putt, really difficult hole to make your par if you don't get it on that top plateau. So many questions asked on this difficult par 4 fifth hole, and it is a hole that you are just thinking, please, oh please, give me a 4 so I can go to the next.
So that was the fifth hole, brought to life again in the Sky Studios to try and show the viewer exactly what goes through the players' minds and heads and bodies when they tee it up at Augusta National. Our partners again with this were a group called Perfect Parallel, who modeled all the holes, and we were able to, as you can see, recreate this in a 3D form in the studio. Again, Dom, what went into this technically to reincarnate the fifth hole into the Sky Studios?
Yeah, so it was a similar setup to what I mentioned before. So, but in this instance, the VR holes are created using Unity. And they utilize a sort of Bluefish plugin to output the scene. And we had NCAM create a bespoke tracking plugin to allow us to move around the holes. The actual hole models are made from radar data produced by Perfect Parallel, as you said, and they're actually life-size models. So these cutouts that you are seeing are the same, basically, models you would probably see in our coverage when we're using fly-throughs. They've actually taken that whole, cut it out of the whole golf course and produced it in that format for us to use. But for me, the biggest hurdle to overcome is the camera offsets. These are hundreds and if not 1,000 meters away due to them being life size. So any tracking issue, such as any bump or blip, is magnified due to the fact that the camera is that far away. This can be toned down with us smoothing all the tracking data, along with basically finding the perfect pivot point within the model for the camera moves, as seen in the video you've just shown.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dom. Again, all the technical jargon probably above my head and probably above Nick's head. Nick, you did that again fantastically well in the studio, being of course a high-level professional in your time and now a presenter on Sky Sports. What were you trying to do here? And of course, you're trying to point to all the right things at all the right places, and it's quite challenging for you to get it absolutely right, isn't it?
Well, it is. And I think Mike would certainly have a smile at the amount of things I get wrong, because the hardest part of my job is actually knowing which is my left and which is my right. Because when I look at where the model should be, if it were there in real life, of course, I'm looking through that at a monitor, and on the monitor, everything's back to the front. So if I think, okay, that's my right hand, I'm actually moving my left on the screen, and things go all wrong. So the idea for me is actually imagine it there in real life in front of me. That makes it easier, and I can picture where the tee box is. I know roughly where the bunkers are on our stage. There's nothing there in real life, of course. So I have to try and manage my way around it like that. The reality of it, though, and what it gives is Augusta National is one of the most famous, if not the most famous golf course, right up there with the old course at St Andrews. One of the most famous in the world. And it's one because it's the only major in golf. It's played on the same course every year. So particularly for our golf fans, they know this golf course, but they've never seen it quite like this. And having played this tournament, fortunately, back in the day, the one thing that strikes every person when they go for the first time, including yourself, I'm sure, is just how hilly it is. And of course, our virtual reality models allow us to be able to see that, actually be able to quantify it in terms of depth or drop in elevations that you'll see on this golf course. So it brings to life the hole like you've never seen before, from an angle that you've never seen before. And ironically, again, it's virtual reality, but what it really gives the viewer is a real sense of reality, of what it really feels like to stand there, what it really feels like for Bryce DeChambeau in this case, to be able to take it across that bunker. And that can only enhance the viewer's experience, in my opinion.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, and again, we interrupted the golf coverage for these 1 minute little pieces to show the viewer what the golfers were facing at that particular time. Hopefully, marrying up the fact that the live golf is on that particular hole at that particular time, and then going to these pieces with Nick explaining exactly how the hole works, bringing it to life, telling the viewer something they didn't know before. They thought they knew the fifth hole at Augusta. Well, this is showing it to them in a completely different way. And again, Mike Allen, the director, was behind this, and again, painstaking rehearsals, going through these pieces and pre-recording them and then playing them in, Mike. But what did you face when you were doing these particular holes, these VRs as we call them, the virtual holes?
Well, I think the truth of the matter is we all take it in turns to mess up. So it involves a lot of rehearsals, because it'll be my fault the first time round. Then Gary Leslie, who's the cameraman, checks the rotor and realizes it's his turn. And we think we're there, and then Nick gets his left and his right mixed up. And then finally, as a group, we all come together. And what you have to be is, that's when you really have to be on point, because you don't quite know when it is. So it's a lot of, there's a lot of ingredients to get to where we are. But the final result is, and there is a lot of, because I've done some of these with Nick live, some we record, and there is a great sense of, we all have to watch each other's backs when we do them, because there's so many parts that have to come together. And sometimes you have to accept a little bit doesn't quite go perfectly, because there's only so many times we've got it in us to keep that going. And sometimes we have time constraints. But I think it's what Nick says. It's, you can see the whole of it in one shot and then come down and look behind where the golfer's going to hit from. You just can't do that in the real world. You can't see everything, 400 or 500 yards, and then come down to literally you're just seeing the golfer where the golfer was standing and see what he can see when he hits off the tee or wherever he hits from. And that's an amazing, it's only virtually you can do that. And it provides an amazing perspective, because when you can show people something that is impossible to see in real life, but actually recreate it and make it real, I think that's amazing. And I think, things like, so for example, our cameraman can just, because it's virtual, can walk down the middle of the fairway with his camera. Literally, he can go anywhere he wants to, behind any tree, up to the green, tight, wide, come round, see behind. And I think it's the versatility that it provides, and therefore all the information it can you can glean from it that really adds such value. And it's and you can use it more than once, because once you bring in the editorial, whether it's how hard Bryson hits it or what people are doing, you can take shots from the day before and put them on that model, so it doesn't just become a sterile piece of look what we can do. It really takes what's happened and gives it more of a context. And they're hard work, but for 2 minutes they're really special television. And it's it's a privilege to have so many people from behind the scenes, as far as Nick at the the top end of it, bringing all that together in a small vignette and do stuff that's that's never been seen before.
Well, thank you, and thanks to all three of you for your incredibly important roles in bringing both the Skyscope and the virtual holes to life in the Masters studio. That's what we did last November, of course, and Dustin Johnson and John Rahm and Matt Fitzpatrick and Rory McIlroy were all brought to life in the studio via Skyscope and that volumetric capture method. And then the virtual holes were brought to life, and I think we did up to 6 or 7 holes of Augusta National, bringing those to life, including the iconic par 5s on the back 9, the 13th and the 15th, and of course that hole that you just saw, the 5th, which was a new hole lengthened by the Masters just a couple of years ago to make it even more challenging. So as Mike said, it was a great privilege to be able to bring those elements to the viewer's attention in an innovative way during the Masters coverage. And it brings us on to how those things might be used in the future, because of the NCAM system, because of the graphic ability of us to put that anywhere, really. We hope to be able to be standing on the first tee at the Ryder Cup, for instance, and to see the players standing there virtually swinging the golf club on the first tee, even though the actual golfer might be warming up on the range. That would be very cool. And to see the holes animate in front of you standing on that very hole would be also very cool. So we're always thinking about how to use the Skyscope technology and the virtual technology in the future in our golf coverage. And of course, I'm sure other sports on Sky Sports will also learn from them. For instance, bringing them into the 100 or F1 or any of the other sports that they use. So a really interesting and innovative way to bring virtual graphics and virtual models into the sporting arena. So I hope that's been interesting. And now it's time to hand back to Will.